Thank you so much for coming. I know a lot of you. I'm Victoria Negri. I'm the writer, director, producer, actor of the film you're about to see, Gold Star. It's been a long, exciting, crazy journey, and I'm very excited to share it with you guys tonight. And this is?
I'm Raquel Stecher, and I'm a film writer, and I'm very proud to introduce this film tonight. I absolutely love this movie. And it's been on a theatrical release, New York City, LA, and I'm so happy now that it's in Boston. And it was on the film festival circuit for a while, and it received some wonderful awards at the Buffalo International Film Festival, Blue Whiskey Film Festival in Chicago, the Art of Brooklyn Film Festival, and the Oxford Film Festival. And it's been getting lots of really great reviews from lots of film critics, myself included. And later, after the movie, we'll do a Q&A. We have composer Ben Levin here, who we'll interview, and casting director Judy Bowman. And then, of course, we have Victoria, too.
I'm Ben Levin, I'm a music guy.
I'm Victoria again, and you saw a lot of me.
I'm Judy Bowman, and I'm the casting gal.
So I have to start with this question, which is, what is the inspiration of the story? What is the origin story of Gold Star?
Yeah, so a lot of people in the audience know this. My father in 2011 had a stroke, and for an entire year he was left unable to speak, and he was actually much worse off than Robert is in the film. He had a trach, and he couldn't eat. It was a really hard year, but I was living out of a suitcase between New York and Connecticut, and trying to act in a lot of films, trying to figure out how I could still be involved in filmmaking. And I just started writing because I was in his hospital by his bedside for a while. So it came out of a place of feeling really isolated from a lot of people my age and going through something that not many people experience when they're 24, taking care of an 87-year-old. So that's definitely a very personal inspiration.
Now I know this is loosely based on the real story, so what elements are fictional and what elements are real?
I'd say the things that are dead on accurate are the caregiving scenes. Those are things that I actually did for my father. The wheelchair, I knew how to do all of those, so that when I was working with Robert, I would just say, okay, this is how I did this with my father, this is how he physically behaved, and yeah, the wheelchair, the lift into the bed, I did with him one day when I felt I didn't even know how to do it really, other than my mom kind of explaining it, which was really stressful. So those are 100% pretty much accurate. I was flipping out at my dad, putting him in the bed because I shouldn't have been doing it. So yeah, the caregiving scenes are the most accurate. Yeah.
So, question for both of you, actually. For Robert Vaughn, what was the casting process like? How did you get him on board?
Judy, take that.
It came about sort of, slowly and then very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
A few years prior, I had talked to a writer, filmmaker friend of mine who had cast Robert in a film that he had done. And I said, wow, Robert Vaughn. It just sort of stuck with me. And then Victoria came to me with the script and the project, and we made a list of people that seemed. It's interesting, when we talked about this before, something that stuck with me was you told me, you said, he's a certain age, but I don't know that we can get an actor that age to do all of these things. Like, even though he's not talking, these things are very physically stressful for someone. I think you had done a workshop of it, and the person who read it said, or a reading of it, the person who read it said, how am I going to act without talking? How am I going to deal with being on a wheelchair? That it was almost more strenuous than if they had not been playing someone with a stroke. So
He really, in this scene where I'm moving him from the couch to the wheelchair, I was really lifting him. I was sweating bullets through so much of this film.
So we talked about maybe casting a younger actor. So we wanted somebody who was, physically able to play frail rather than somebody who was frail. You know, and then it sort of came to me that, oh yeah, Robert Vaughn, he was in that independent film, which I thought was really interesting that he kind of took that risk. And I knew his, you know, he was in his 80s, but I was told by his manager that, you know, he works out by that filmmaker, he works out every day, you know, is a very, very vibrant, committed, disciplined guy. And luckily, you know, I'm of a certain age. I think I was very young when The Man from U.N.C.L.E. was happening, and Victoria's quite a bit younger than me. So I was like, wow, you know, we both knew who he was and knew he was a legend. And he read it and he liked it and he said yes. Like, so.
Very fast.
Yeah.
Once you sent the script to his manager, I think it was within a week, he was on board, and
Yeah.
I couldn't even process that.
I was like, do we really have this guy? You know, and I think it was nice that we were in a position where we could really see that, that it was something special, and that we both, you know, knew his previous work, and then you got together with him. And then we found out he lived in Connecticut where we were shooting,
Thank God.
and I'm from Connecticut, and I was like, oh my God, this is like fate, you know, so. Yeah, he was from a little farther away than
Ridgefield,
where we're
yeah.
from, but they met, and it was like, they just, you know, and I was like, wow, they're gonna be father-daughter, this is really interesting. And we also talked about how, you know, a person who is older playing someone who is looking death in the face, or looking at their own physical mortality, you know, their own weakness, that's tricky. Luckily, I don't really know what that is like. And we both, you know, we sort of said this might be hard for someone, like, who either doesn't want to deal with it or really wants to deal with it. And I think we just got lucky. And I was lucky to have somebody who could see, you know, it's not like if we didn't go to Robert Vaughn, I was going to be like, maybe this is a missed opportunity, but there were other people. But luckily, like, and I think about this a lot, that you just said, yeah, what a great idea. You know, it was just, it all kind of, we all agreed that this was going to be something great if he liked it. So yeah, once
Incredibly lucky.
yeah, and I think we're so I every day now that Robert Vaughn isn't with us anymore, I think how wonderful it was that we could do that with him and he could do that with us. You know.
Now, what was it like working with him on set?
Oh, I was really intimidated at first, right when I met. Pulling up to his house, and I think I wrote this I wrote a piece for Raquel's site about working with Robert after he passed away last year. And the entire hour car ride up to his house to initially meet him, I was really freaking out. I had just read his autobiography, which was probably a stupid idea to do right before meeting him, to know even more about how legendary he was. And I pulled up to his driveway, and I was kind of doing like deep breathing, relaxing, and he was already on the front steps, waving at the car, saying, hello, and I was like, oh no, thrown in it. But that's just who he was. He was such a giving person, and he looked at this film for an acting challenge, and he said to me on set many times that many people took chances on him and that he wanted to do the same for me. And I haven't even had time to process how meaningful this is for me, that his final film is my first. And I could have made a disaster of a film, and I'm really proud of it, and I think Robert would be too. And I'm just eternally grateful to him for saying yes and taking these huge chances. With no dialogue. So he was just game for it, and a giving person, and a joy to have on set. He wasn't hiding. We set up this entire area of my mom's house where no one needed to bother him. We worked it out with his manager in the contract. Robert will have his own bathroom, his own room. No one will bother him, and he spent no time there because he was just talking with everyone and telling stories. He was like my dad, really. He really was, just telling stories, and such a joy.
Now, you have other amazing people in the cast. What was it like getting Catherine Curtin on board? Oh, fantastic cast.
I mean, Kathy's just amazing. I remember her audition. I'll never forget her audition. It was so natural and real. And the problem for me was, for anyone here that knows my mom, and I know a bunch of people do, my mom's a very unique person, and it was very difficult to find somebody that could simultaneously portray a very hard exterior, but let vulnerability through it at unexpected times. And a lot of people weren't getting that, but I feel like Kathy really did. And Jacob, who plays Chris, that was for me a no-brainer. He was the second person to audition, I remember, and I think I said to Judy, like, that's it,
Yeah.
cancel everyone else, this guy's
That was
great.
great, yeah, that was really fun, casting
Yeah.
Jacob. Because Jacob, I knew him he was like a student that I had come in contact with. And I was like, this is your part, and he came in, he was so nervous. He was like, should I try to be less nerdy or more nerdy? And I'm like, don't
Just be you,
do anything, just act.
Be Jacob.
Yeah. And then we sort of felt out other types.
Yeah, it was weird.
And we're like, yeah, no. But he competed with people who had a lot more cred and
It's his first
experience.
film role.
Yeah.
That's impressive
Yeah.
for a first time,
Mhm.
yeah.
So with him, it was just abundantly clear.
Yeah, he was so good.
Because, you can see what he's like. It's like you have that, and then you have all these sort of more boring or traditional or stereotypical
Actory
guys,
kinda,
pretty boy,
Yeah, pretty.
and he was great.
Yeah.
He was a lot more normal, I feel like, regular, rather than there was no OCD thing that was going on.
Mhm.
We just knew he was sort of bookish.
Mhm.
And then with Kathy, it was, I knew Kathy for years, but I never imagined her for this part. And we just saw a lot of women who were either too warm or too tough. And it was hard, it was hard, it was Victoria's first film. It was hard to really, for me even, to wrap my head around, who is this person?
Should have just introduced you to my
Get it.
mom.
And then when I met her mom, I was like, I understand.
I get it.
And actually, when I saw Kathy's performance, I said, I understand what that is now. But I think it was hard to conjure this person who had that all, and especially in the audition setting,
Yeah.
just wasn't enough stuff there in the scenes really to, auditioning with a reader to really see what that needed.
Yeah.
But Kathy's, she's mercurial and she likes to be vulnerable, she likes to show emotion. And it was kind of, when they all said, oh, she could do it, I was like, okay, So, and then there were some people in there who, I kind of love this, who played other parts, who had been a part of the project before I came on. Maria, Anna Garduño was someone who did a reading of it.
Mhm.
And they're like, we want to see this girl. And I was like, okay. And we saw a lot of people, and then they're like, let's go with her. And I never really realized that they weren't just being loyal, but that she had that performance in her. She really, I find it very funny. I think that character is kind of hilarious. And I think I didn't realize it was funny. I just thought she was kind of bitter and, but I enjoy her performance a lot. So there were some people in it that were actors that you guys knew that you wanted to give a job to, like the two guys in the bar.
And my grandma is the lady in the gym.
Oh, is that your grandma?
It's my grandma, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So you kissed her on the mouth.
There were certain things in this film that, like,
I'm glad she's your grandma.
right before doing certain things in this film, I was like, why did I write this? Now I have to do this. Great.
So music is really important in the film. How did you come on board with the project?
Sure, well, my brother, it's nepotism. My brother and Vicki have been together for a long time, and so I've known Vicki for a long time, and I've been, sort of peripherally in touch with the story as it's unfolded in real life, and then much more so as just a part of the general, Vicki realizing she was going to make the movie, then talking about the movie, and writing the movie, and, seeing some scripts, and so I feel like I always understood pretty naturally what Vicki was going for, and it was just always a film where the strongest moments are when almost nothing is happening, and so the score had to be something that wasn't much of anything, if possible, just kind of haunted the movie, but rather than being like something that drastically changed the aesthetic, or there's some spots where you would maybe think to put music when Vicky's character and Robert's character just staring at each other, but that would kind of ruin it. So I think it was helpful that I knew, like, Vicki did a great job explaining things, and I knew generally, like, when there should be no music. I think that was the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of those moments where there's silence is just really powerful, but then there's moments where the music comes in and it's a very emotional scene and it adds to it. So, like, what was your inspiration for the music? Like, what was your process to
Well,
do that?
it's a little tricky because, you know, I realize it now that I've seen it, you know, many times. Whenever music enters, it's almost like a dubstep drop. Like, even if you're just entering with a little piano note, it's like, you know. And so, Vicki, so the music had to fit in the home. It had to fit in the environment. Otherwise, it felt like an outside intruder, and it's hard to prevent that.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, so like you know, you see a lot of piano in the film, and the piano is something that I think is a metaphor for Vicki's relationship with her father, because it's a source of conflict, but ultimately it's the sweetest moment in the movie is them just kind of looking at their deeper connection, and the piano is the symbol for like all the great memories they've had together. So having the piano be this spooky kind of undertone the whole time just kind of, I think, emphasized the darkness of the piano without, you know, without creating too much darkness that you're going to turn what's already kind of like a sad movie into a, you know, like a unbearable nightmare.
I don't think it's that sad. There's a lot of
Funny
like when I hear the laughter at the same moments at every screening, it makes me so happy. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
Well, I'm interested about the collaborative process. It sounds like you worked with a lot of people on the process, and I know that with the cinematographer, you did a lot of the work even before you started filming.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about some of the work on the cinematography?
Yeah, I mean, for me, because obviously I wore so many hats for this film, the pre-production was so key because I really needed to be able to focus more on working with the actors once we were on set than worrying about planning shots. I mean, everything had to be locked in. So I hired my cinematographer about 1.5 years, and Judy also has worked with Sarah. His name's Sarah. He's fantastic. Just a smart filmmaker, but also just a great person to work with. And for the whole 1.5 years leading up to the shoot, we went through every single shot of the film. We not only planned the shots, but wrote out like why we were choosing to frame the characters in certain ways, so that if we had to readjust, we knew like what we were going for. We walked through all of the locations together. Things as specific as where the sun would be, setting in the house, so we knew how the light would be. So that once we were on set, and it was this 1.5 years long talking with him and mapping everything out, I could really just kind of look at the monitor, give him the okay, like that's perfect, that's what we talked about, and then focus on the acting, because I really trusted him by the time we got to the shoot. And that's so important if you're directing yourself acting, because you can't do everything at once. It'll fall apart. So yeah, I'm really lucky in the people that said yes to this film and worked really, you know, much harder than they, you know, than the paychecks. But I just want to keep working with these same people. It was just an incredible process for me. Yeah, I had a blast.
The cinematography is beautiful, like that shot with Robert Vaughn at the very beginning with the mist, that's gorgeous, and you underneath the willow tree, the shots of the beach. I mean, the movie has a really great sense of place, and I know it was filmed in your hometown and your childhood home too.
Yeah,
like, can you talk about like the locations in the movie?
Yeah, for me I mean, most people work at the location scout, but I spent years of my life growing up in this place. And when I knew I was going to shoot the film, I slowly started to think, okay, where are some beautiful places? Where can I put the camera, even like in my front yard, to make it look a certain way? And I had a whole list of locations so that once it came to the pre-production with the, with the cinematographer and other, the assistant director, I would show them certain streets. The streets for driving had to be really specific because they couldn't be really busy streets. But they also had, the light had to be a certain way. So it was a lot of really specific thinking about location. And I had a lot of fun doing that. I spent a lot of time, I love that beach that's right near my house, and you actually can walk to that island. And I spent a lot of time sitting there writing this film, so watching the film for me is very strange. Because of things like that, and because we shot in the hospital my dad stayed at. So it's all been very personal. But
how did that affect the acting part of it? Because you wore so many hats on this film, like being in the places where these things happened.
Yeah, the one moment that really stands out for me is when we were at the rehab center we shot at Gaylord in Wallingford, Connecticut. I hadn't been there other than a location scout since my father stayed there. And we were shooting in the room across from the room he stayed in. And all of a sudden these alarms went off in the hospital. And to somebody's a medical device or something. And I forgot what those sounded like because I hadn't heard them in about 3 years. And it flooded this kind of like sensory feelings of all these memories of being there with my dad and thinking about the film and wondering how long I would have my dad. And then I'm shooting the film and my father's gone and it's Robert Vaughn playing. It's all just very strange experience. And the stuff with the cowboy hat and all of the stuff in the script about you want to watch a cowboy movie because Robert Vaughn was in The Magnificent Seven. But I find that also strange because I wrote all of that before we cast Robert, but my father was a huge fan of cowboy movies. So there's so much in this film that's so intertwined, and I haven't had much distance from it for obvious reasons. So I think like in a couple of years I'll start sobbing uncontrollably. But it's been such a surreal process, really.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Go ahead.
Okay, so obviously I'm a huge Benny fan, and I've heard that song, I'm Still Here at the End credits, like a million times. When did you write that versus for the movie or like in general?
Well, that song, we
Is that the song during the end credits?
yeah, that song we brought to the table in like 2013, I think, or 2012.
So like in your process of writing it, did it like get incorporated because of the movie or other circumstances?
So Vicki, that song's about my grandpa after he had a stroke, funny enough, and Vicki knew him, and there are certain references to him in the movie, kind of, and so it's just like kind of goes to our familial relationship that we have. It's a coincidence that that song was such a perfect fit, but like Vicki knew our catalog and knew the story behind that, so was able to pick it out like very easily. So I think that was your call on there.
Yeah, I love the song. I thought it was perfect. He wrote it before I made the film. Yeah, and a whole bunch of other Bentley band members. Thank you guys for letting us use the song. Yeah, it's so perfect. I love that song. In a few screenings, they accidentally cut the end credit music, and I scream. I'm like, no, it's too perfect. Why would you do this? But yeah, it's a great song.
Go ahead.
Was your father a fan of Robert Vaughn?
Yeah, I mean, my dad. Magnificent Seven. How could he not be? I just wonder what's so strange about this for me is I would have never made this film if I didn't lose my dad, and I just wonder what my dad would think of the film. But it's I don't know. But he was a fan.
Yeah, just one more quick one. The island, which beach is that off?
Yeah, so that's off of Silver Sands in Milford.
Oh.
It's called Charles Island. Yeah.
Oh.
Have you walked across to
You know,
go to the island?
I've gotten close, but every time I try to do it, the tides, I have to look up when the tides are properly, when it's low tide, because I've timed it wrong and the tides come in and then I have to turn around, and it's a much longer walk than you think. It's almost a mile, I think.
Yeah.
Judy's from Connecticut too.
Yeah, I'm
She
from
knows-
Fairfield,
Yeah,
so
she-
I knew about that island, and there are plenty of people that get stuck out there.
Yeah, people have
'Cause
gotten washed away.
They go, and then the tide starts to come in, and then they freak out, and you always see them getting rescued or coming back.
Was that island symbolic in those stories?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this whole film is about people living in between places. Not, you know, you're just not well, but you're not sick. You're not in Connecticut. You're physically and mentally and emotionally. And an island is in the middle of everything, so it's like, you know, on the nose. But a lot of people have, a lot of different interpretations. Yeah.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
So did the time of year just work out serendipitously, or was that also a transitional sort of, you're in autumn during the film?
Yeah, it just worked out. It was when we decided to pull the trigger and shoot. I pushed the project a few times because I wanted to. We did a fundraising for more money to hire Judy, to get Robert on board. I initially was playing around with working with non-name actors and even non-actors for the whole film because some filmmakers I really admired did that, like Sean Baker, who just did Florida Project. I ultimately decided that's not for me. I wanted to get some people on board that had some cachet and talent. Thank God I did. That's why people are paying attention to this film. But yeah, it's... Yeah. Oh, what,
I
yeah.
have a Facebook Live
Oh.
question. Are you still discovering new things about the story, even in this late stage of production?
Who is that from?
The name went up, I can't see it.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I mean, so the question was, am I discovering new things about the film this late in the process? Yeah, for sure. It's watching the film, I feel like I learned things about myself that subconsciously come through. I'm also just learning more and more about filmmaking and distribution in general. I'm having tons of conversations with people. I'm always trying to pick people's brains and share my knowledge. So yeah, on every level, I'm learning about myself and film. Yeah, I'm like a sponge.
Anyone else? Can you guys tell us what you're working on now? If you have any projects that you're in the middle of?
So my band Bentley is always very busy doing all kinds of things. We're making a piece for with the Boston Conservatory, or the Conservatory at Berkeley as it's now called, for 7 percussionists in the band, and we're going to premiere it in Europe and New York and Boston next year in the spring.
Wow.
So I have a next script written. It's called Ultra. It's about a woman who runs 100 miles across Death Valley and has a psychotic break with reality. So it's a psychological thriller, much different, not personal.
I want to watch that.
I just completed casting, and we wrapped shooting for a new episodic called Big Dogs, which is going to be kind of original content. We're going to sell it and put it, streaming or put it on cable. And I've got 2 independent films, one which is a story about an African-American basketball player who played for the Israeli leagues in the 80s, and we're shooting that in Israel next year. So I found somebody, a good name to play the lead, and he'll get a big trip to the Middle East. And then there's another film that I'm working on the casting for that's also shooting next year that Sorrow is going to DP. That's about a woman who is in a wheelchair.
Sorrows.
Yeah, so it's been a great casting process, talking to a different community of actors and finding a variety of people to play other parts. Even there are parts who are, the roles are not people who are wheelchair users, but we're trying to put as many people who use prosthetic or are wheelchair users in these roles, but they're playing people who are not wheelchair users, they're able-bodied. The roles are able-bodied. So that'll be a wonderful and dramatic story for next year.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thanks.
guys. I really appreciate it.